Good afternoon. My name is Maureen Bear, and I'm here with Ben Kickert, and another of our colleagues, Cadet Blake, is online. And we're here to talk to you about the Sustainable Development Goals and how we've been working to get some metrics out of different kinds of media. So just a little bit of background. I'm just going to talk for about 5 minutes to do some background, and most of the presentation is going to be Ben showing you some new coding that's been done. The Sustainable Development Goals are the world's strategic plan. They've been in existence, put out by the UN for about 6 years, and we've been working using Wolfram to help figure out how they are doing counting and keeping track of things for the Sustainable Development Goals. Ben has done lots of presentations in the past on this. The coming of COVID has caused some particular problems because lots of things have gone wrong. And for good reason, Wolfram capabilities have improved in ways that have helped us be able to get more data out of less formal kinds of data sources over the past year. And that's what we're going to be talking to you about today. So just a little bit about the Sustainable Development Goals and what's happened because of COVID. First of all, they were already off track. If you know anything about them, they're quite ambitious. And for the 2019 SDG UN conference, the major theme of that was that perhaps they were so ambitious that too many countries were getting off track in terms of meeting their targets for the goals. When COVID arrived, there are estimates there now that many of the targets have been set back by as much as 10 years. And some people think that the getting people out of poverty has been set back by as much as 20 years. From a data collection and statistics point of view, COVID caused the shutdown of almost all in-country statistics offices, and it stopped much of the standard data collection. What data collection was going on, there have been shifts toward COVID, keeping track of what's happening with COVID and mortality and various other statistics. And especially in poor countries, the statistical and data collection abilities that exist have been further taxed. For people who actually work in statistics, data collection, and analysis, this disruptor has meant many fewer conferences, all conferences, webinars, and standard report delivery schedules have been disrupted. More reports we see have been based on forecasts and projections rather than results because they don't have results. And so the way of looking at metrics has been quite different. There's been much more missing data because collection has not been happening. And we've been seeing in reports that we've seen as sort of standard reports over the years that there's much more mixing of old and new data, which makes it much more difficult to do trends and comparison. On the other hand, this has given us lots of opportunities to test all sorts of Wolfram capabilities to try to find and make computable data. We haven't been successful in all cases, but it's been a great exploration, and Ben's going to show you a few things that we have been able to do. I'd just like to talk about a few of the data sources and some things I've seen that have been less than ideal. First of all, Wolfram, we had looked for years for the expanding capabilities in PDF for Wolfram, and Wolfram came through really well last year. What we discovered is that it was not the holy grail that we had hoped it would be, because if the people who are making the PDF are not formatting it correctly, it increases the degree of difficulty, particularly getting things like images out. The second thing that we've seen a trend in is that as infographics have gotten better and prettier and bringing more data to the eye, the ability to capture computable data has gotten less and less. And also we're finding that in some cases, the infographics do not link to real data. They're just sort of generalizations. So that's made things tricky in terms of trying to get information out of infographics. There seems to be a deterioration in some things that we thought were standardized. Nobody has really, that we've been able to find at least, figured out how to get good data out of images of charts and graphs. GPT-3 and other AI are not quite ready for prime time. Hopefully by next year they will be, to be able to do summarization and keywords and things of that sort. We've been very excited. We've been able to use almost all of the ways to get things out using different Wolfram functionalities. And what I'll say here is even I, who am not a coder at all, have been able to use these to do exploration. So that's made me very excited this year. On the other hand, the data that's coming from non-official sources, we're not real confident about making any kinds of definitive business conclusions on. And that is sort of a setup, and I'm going to hand it over to Ben, and he's going to give you 2 examples of how we have used Wolfram to get data out in a difficult year. Over to you, Ben. Thanks.
Thank you, Maureen. Yeah, as Maureen mentioned, this is something that we've been working on in various stages for many years, particularly looking at video, audio, and PDFs as ways to extract data. One of the challenges that we've come up against is we're moving now into, I wouldn't call it big data yet, but it's certainly beyond taking one PDF and trying to figure out what we can learn from it. So one of the examples that we want to share when we're looking at textual analysis is to take a look at some of the work we've done around the voluntary national reviews for the SDGs. If you're not familiar, the VNRs are country-specific reports that go to the UN and basically are an update on how things are unfolding at a local level. All of these can be viewed online. We've included the link there. Collectively, if you look over the last 6 years, we found over 273 documents and over 30,000 pages. And so being able to identify information from one PDF, there might be a technique that would work, but we want something that's going to work in a way that's much broader across a lot of different formats and a lot of different ways of setting it up. And so we've looked at some things that might be slightly more low level, but can be extrapolated across the whole. Just as a note, I'm going to go relatively quickly through the code, but we will upload this notebook into our session, so you can download it, and we'll give you contact information as well if you want to reach out to us. So for us, first step is simply being able to pull in the VNR data. So this ends up being years, countries, languages, and report links. That allows us to start doing some quick generalizations so we can figure out what's going on. For instance, we can look at how many reports are coming in each year, and we know that about 40 to 50 are coming in every year. So that's about how many we have to process on a yearly basis. We can also start looking at who's been doing reports. This comes in handy as you're looking at changes across years. So we can see countries like Uruguay have been knocking it out of the park with 3 reports already in 2017, 18, and 21. And notably missing from this list is the United States of America, which has yet to report. So this is part of the reason we do this, is to be able to get to the meta information behind the data itself. Now, once we had a list of all of the PDF links, we wanted to, again, find something we could standardize and do analysis for all 270 or whatever that there are. The process we did, and we actually did this in a separate notebook, but we've uploaded the final results here, is we imported all the plain text for those reports and included word counts as well as the overall length of those data sets. So this gave us some material that we could begin working with. The first thing that, let me go to the next one, sorry. So the first thing that we wanted to see if it would work, because we've seen some great explanations and exhibitions on sentiment analysis. There was one a couple of years ago about tracking the plot flows of Alice in Wonderland here at the WTC. I thought it was excellent. And so we said, hey, let's bring in all of the sentences from these PDFs, and we can see how positive or how negative they are. Looking at the information, we found that partially because of the fact that VNRs are relatively dry and technical, the vast majority end up being comprised of neutral statements. But we can come up with what we call the positivity rate to be able to see what percentage of non-neutral sentences are positive. And so that's something that we can start analyzing across years. What we were curious if we would see was whether or not, with COVID and all of the issues that Maureen alluded to, if we saw a drop off in sentiment, in positivity and in sentiment. As people started seeing challenges, did we see more sentences that said things like, we're not going to reach this goal, we were unable to do X, Y, Z. And so by applying a sentiment analysis to everything, to all of the data that we brought in, we can start visualizing to see if there's changes. In this case, we didn't see it. We thought that we might, but we actually see that 2020 was a pretty typical year. And actually, if you look at the averages, 2021 was slightly higher than the last two. The reason we included this, even though it was a result opposite of what we were expecting to see, is because we have seen this work in other data sources. So looking at tweet sentiments and changes during the election, looking at things like blog posts and seeing how you see those shifts. So this is a large scale text analysis that's being done to hundreds of PDFs at one time, and depending on the content may be applicable in other settings. The next thing we wanted to look at is being able to track keywords in the VNRs. And so since we already had the word counts, it was pretty easy to start looking at each year, what were people talking about, and being able to visualize how things changed. And so, for instance, if we look at 2019, we see that education is front and center. In 2020, education is also front and center. And no surprise to anybody, health becomes one of the big issues in 2021 that countries are reporting on. Again, this would be in line with what we were expecting. The other side of the coin is, where did education go? It's dropped down a bit, but we want to be able to identify that as well. So that's looking at overall lists of keywords or of words used. But how about how words are changing year to year? So an easy example is basically to look at every report from each year and say, proportionally, because report lengths change, proportionally, how often is a word like COVID-19 used? No surprise, never mentioned in 2016 through 2019. We can see that that is becoming a theme in the 2020 reports. And by 2021, that's risen to a pretty significant level. But then what about how trends have changed based on external influences? What about a word like health? We see that health peaked in 2017, it dropped down in 2018 and 2019, and then has been on the rise since. Again, that probably aligns with some of the other outside knowledge that we have. Discussion about the environment and discussion about climate has decreased from earlier peaks. We're talking less about gender, we're talking less about women. Data as a whole is being talked about less, as is water, which peaked earlier. Now, one of the things that we have paid attention to is not only the outside world influences, but also the event and the document influences. So each year, these VNRs are presented as part of the high-level political forum on sustainable development. And each year, certain goals are set as being thematic. And so we need to keep this in mind before we draw any hard conclusions, because we know in 2017 that health was one of the focus areas. So if we scroll back up and look at health, it makes sense that more people were talking about it. So that's kind of a check on drawing firm conclusions. The next thing we wanted to do is to look at broad areas of keywords. So when we talk about health, it's a lot more than just the word health. When we talk about HIV or tuberculosis or maternal mortality, all of those are health words. And so part of the research our team has done is come up with a list of words that are included in the targets, so we can see how often these keywords, this collective keywords, are being used in the reports. And by checking every report against every set of keywords, we're actually able to come up with a list of how often different SDGs have been talked about for each year. And so this goes beyond single words and is instead a bit more comprehensive. So when we look at SDG 3, which is health, we see that rise that we would expect. Given the disruptions we've seen from COVID, we want to pay attention to what's losing traction. SDG 4 is education, and that's one that we're seeing. When we look at gender equality, and when we look at things like clean water, these are things that we want to pay attention to the fact that it's being discussed less in these reports. So again, this is not a tool that we would present saying, here is definitively what's happening. But when you're dealing with 300,000 pages of PDFs, this gives us a good tool to be able to figure out where we need to be paying more attention. If you want to pay attention to a country and how country reports are changing, that can also be brought in as well. So for countries like Azerbaijan and Egypt, who've reported 3 times already, you can actually see how priorities have changed year to year. So this is the first time in kind of our working with PDFs where we've been able to reach a point of automation where we can start, and I won't say conclusions, but we've gotten to a place where we can be alerted of things that we need to pay attention to. So still a long way to go, and we'll talk about some of our next steps in a second. But we're pleased that some of the things we said we wanted to do in the upcoming year, we've been able to do already. Next slide. So when we talk about PDFs and we talk about the VNRs, we're dealing with a lot of data. When we deal with videos, we're again dealing with a lot of data, but unfortunately working with video, you've also got file issues, you've got conversion issues, and that becomes a much more difficult medium to try to extract useful information. For us as a team that focuses on tracking how the Sustainable Development Goals are being worked on, every year, the UN World Data Forum is kind of our keystone event. That was actually held a couple weeks ago. There were over 80 sessions with experts across the world, and there is no way that even if our team was watching full time, we could cover all of that. But because the videos were available, we were able to actually do some processing on those to be able to get some summaries and again, achieve that place where we know where we need to be paying attention. So I'm just using an example of 4, although we do have about 80 that have been downloaded. So we have 4 videos that we've brought in. We're able to then start doing some Wolfram functions, applying Wolfram functions to this. The first thing we did was we used video frame extract and essentially took out 1 slide for every minute of the video. And the idea here is just like if you're opening up a YouTube clip and you want to see if you're going to pay attention to it, you're going to mouse over it and see, what those frame grabs are. We wanted to be able to do the same thing for these longer things, or these longer clips. And so for us, looking at these 4 videos, we took a randomized 12 frame grid, and we want to be able to say, is this a video that we need to be paying attention to? And we were kind of amazed at how much you can learn simply by looking at a grid of screen grabs. So this first one, for instance, we see a lot of text-based slides. Looking at the title and looking at the frame grabs, we can assume that this is going to be a concept-heavy type presentation, not directly data-related, but probably more heavy on ideas that need to be pursued. Looking at the next 2 sessions, we see only faces and people sitting at a table. Probably going to be more of a talking heads interview. Might be entertaining, but for people who are looking to find and analyze data, those might be 2 that we're gonna skip over. But then we look at the third one, and this one kind of catches our attention. Because what we see is at least half of the images are graphs and charts. And so right off the bat, we know that this is something that's going to be up our alley. They're going to be talking about reports. They're going to be talking about that data. We can take that and translate it to our desire as a team to be able to keep up with how the SDGs are being monitored and tracked. So with that, if we bring in all those frames, we actually have our own scrubber that we can go through all the videos. We're able to identify which areas. So like, for instance, at minute 41, looking at homicide rates, this is going to be a data-driven presentation. If we want to know more about it, we're able to pull a video clip, join it together, and basically come up with a customized segment, a couple-minute segment, so we'll know what's being discussed in this area. Now, the next piece gets into how we summarize audio. Videos obviously are a combination of moving images as well as audio. A lot is being discussed at events like the UN World Data Forum. And we have several tools that allow us to pull out audio clips once it's been downloaded. Built in, just using the audio wrapper in Wolfram, you can pull in the audio from the video. So that's something that we can bring in. But in order to really process that, we need to get to some computable data, in this case, a string. This is an area where we've run into some issues in terms of making the functionality of Wolfram achieve the types of results that we were hoping for. It could definitely be issues on our side. It could be computer issues, but in our experience, trying to use speech recognize, which should be a great tool, on a longer clip simply doesn't work. We maxed out at about a minute before we started having some stability issues. But using a 50-second clip here, this is with a speaker who clearly enunciates and has good pauses. We were able to get an idea of what is kind of in the realm of possibility for Wolfram speech recognize. Here we see not quite the most timely data, calling it coded 19. We know that's going to be COVID-19. We see that there's a lack of punctuation and capitalization, but on a whole, this is passable. We can follow this conversation and know what's happening. But if this isn't going to work for an hour-long video, what other options do we have? One thing that we've done, and we call it the YouTube hack. These videos are available on YouTube. If you click on the 3 dots on a YouTube video and open transcript, you can copy the entire transcript, paste it in a text document, and have everything you need. The nice thing about that is it's actually going to give you the timestamps as well. So if you want to find out where we're talking about women being held longer with their abusers, we can see that's in the 31st minute. So this is something that not only is instantaneous because you're not requiring any external processing, but it also includes the information of timestamps. What we're missing, though, is again the capitalization and the punctuation. So the solution that we've gone with most frequently has been an outside service called otter.ai. This is a paid service, but for us, given the number of videos and meetings and recordings we have, it's become kind of a mainstay of the way that we process video and audio data. One of the advantages is that it not only includes your timestamp, but it also does speaker identification. So for our team, if we record a Zoom call, it's going to tell you that Kinet spoke at this minute, Maureen spoke at this minute, Ben rambled on during these minutes. And so we can include that information if we want to select specific things. From a speed point of view, it's about 15 minutes to process a 1 hour. So right now we're looking more at using an external service, but we hope to get to the point that the Wolfram built-in features will work. Now that you have that audio data that's been transcribed, you can start looking at, again, ways to visualize to understand what a video content might be focused on. Not surprising that a video about violence against women and the data around it shows up with a word cloud like this. But what is interesting is if you look at the other videos. And so violence in women, we've removed a few other keywords like data, because every session is about data, doesn't have quite the focus. So by having a quick word cloud based on the transcripts, you're able to understand, is this video a little bit more rambling? Does this video cover a wide range of topics? Maybe I'm interested in data around HIV. Do I even see HIV? So again, just a quick way to process through what's literally hundreds of hours of video in a way that we can include that. So then where do we go from here? These are just 2 tools, 2 ways that in the last year we've explored how we can take what is traditionally non-computable data and turn it into something that we can learn from, that we can summarize from. So given our focus on SDG data as well as impact investing, we want to continue to get better at how can we create visual summaries of key conferences and events. We want to look at what tools are being introduced that may provide opportunities for that. For instance, the video intervals function is something that we're exploring as a way to be able to figure out when you have a still frame on a screen, so that we can identify where clips of a PowerPoint presentation may be, so we can essentially recreate a PowerPoint presentation. The other thing that we spent quite a bit of time on and had limited success, and certainly need to explore more, is ways to extract charts, maps, diagrams from PDFs. there's been a lot of work, a lot of advancement on the PDF export, but unfortunately, it's always going to come down to who designed the PDF and who exported it. So you'll often find something designed in Word is going to give you a vector graphic of just the bars of a bar chart, but isn't going to actually give you the labels. And so even extracting page images or the images from a page isn't going to get you what you need. Instead, we need to be able to take a page capture and from that identify, essentially do an object detection to say, find the maps, find the bar charts, find the graphs. We spent quite a few hours looking at neural nets, everything from YOLO to several in the neural net repository. We attempted to do our own training, our own predicting, to both be able to identify video frames that would include charts and graphs, as well as to be able to extract them from a page capture or a screen capture. So that's not something we've been able to, that's not a nut we've been able to crack, but it is high on our list of where we hope to go next. So in summary, we have continued to make progress on our mission to be able to analyze and understand how data around the Sustainable Development Goals is being tracked, monitored, and shared. But we're also at the point where we're very thankful for the Wolfram community, both the staff as well as the participants here, who we can continue to have these dialogues about how these things work for us. So thank you so much. We've got 3 minutes left. If there are any questions, I think I have the right chat pulled up. Otherwise, let me add my email to anybody that wants to reach out and ask questions on your own. Yes, and so actually there's a comment here from Dorothy about doing a Zoom recording and doing professional versions and having that integrated. And my understanding is it's actually Otter AI that's behind that. So you can have a Zoom meeting automatically go into Otter AI. They've got a lot of cool tools that integrate to meetings that you're already a part of, depending on where you recorded or where it comes from. So yes, Zoom is something that has been kind of at the forefront, I think, in terms of providing both live transcriptions. I think even this one has live transcripts, but doing a really good job of being able to store and search that. That's something I use in my personal life and personal meetings as well as this one. Thank you for that, Dorothy. Well, if that's the case, then until next year, we hope to see you in 2022. But thank you all so much for coming out, for the questions you've had, and do feel free to reach out. We look forward to talking more. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.